So you can go to any existing DBT code project, an open source project, and open it up in Prophecy. And it will open up as visual pipeline. So this visual to code is bidirectional. We are saying visual and code is the same paradigm. As long as, so now as a, let's say if you're using DBT, so what you can do is open any project, it becomes visual pipelines. You can edit it visually or you can edit it in code and the other side gets updated instantly.
Hey, and welcome to Software Engineering Daily. We're super excited to have Raj Bains with us from Prophecy. In past lives, Raj has been a product manager at Apache Hive Hortonworks when he took that right through the IPO. When I met him, he told me he was he had in the past worked on compilers and database internals at Microsoft, to which I always say, you had me at compilers. I'm really glad to have you on the show. Welcome, Raj.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Really excited to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about Prophecy to start with. Tell us a little bit about why you started it and what it does.
So why I started it was that I was working with a lot of data users, right? So I'm product manager of Apache Hive, going to enterprises, seeing everything they had. And some of the products they had were more sophisticated than what we were selling. What we were selling was cheaper. And also I saw the users really struggle with their ETL tools. And coming from compilers background, I looked at these tools and I was like, these are quite simplistic. And something much more sophisticated can be built here and saw the productivity challenges people are having with big data. So that's when I decided to work on Prophecy. No, and at that time, like there was nothing in the cloud, right? So you have all these ETL products like Ab Initio, IBM Data Stage, really large suites written for the technology 20 years, 30 years back. And Informatica has done over 25 years now. So there is no replacement product in the cloud. So that was also the second thing. There seems to be a lot of opportunity in building the best cloud replacement product, as Snowflake would replace Teradata, for say.
Yeah, that's an interesting model. I have to say, in the data pipeline and data management world, we don't have enough of a meeting of the minds. It's really interesting that you come from this incredibly technical background, which is one community in the data world. And then you're reaching out to the less technical community to make sure that they have all the tools they need. So it's an interesting marriage, right, of highly performant enterprise grade pipeline building that's accurate with inviting in all these other subject matter experts and business leads who have kind of been locked out.
Yes, and I feel like that the main thing is the technology has to come meet the users where their skills are. And it's not like their skills are different. So for example, somebody might really understand the business, the data of the business, and the analytics to be performed on that, right? And that person is interested in transforming the data, getting it ready to do the analytics they want to do. Now, if you require them to be experts in data platforms, the Hadoops, the Sparks, and coding in that, it's asking them too much. That's not their job, right? And the question is, can the technology not be built to meet them where their skill set is? And it totally can be built. So why won't we?
One of the things I've heard you speak about, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about, is what is the experience of a data engineer who's not using Prophecy today?
So a data engineer who's not using Prophecy is they typically move to code. Some of them have been in the previous companies, worked with on-prem systems. So there's two buckets, right? And they know what good looks like. So let's say somebody's been using Ab Initio. They had this tool suite. They could do visual drag and drops, see data after every stage of the pipeline, quickly deploy it into production, search, see lineage, all of that, right? If they're changing a data set, they could look at a data set, click a column and say, what is the impact if I change this column? Look at all the downstream users and understand the impact, right? And similarly, you had support folks who could look at a column which went wrong, and suddenly the team says, hey, I want to find out who last broke it. They follow up the lineage and say, this is the last person who edited this this column, and go there, right? And last 3-4 pipelines might be just passed through because in enterprises these tables get like 1,200 columns, right? The big fat tables. So now, if somebody's coming from this background, let's say they move to the cloud, now they're writing scripts, right? They have a bunch of scripts. They've written them, maybe they have some CI/CD setup, and that could be, for a lot of them, it's manual. Still, moving to production is, separate, and they create the jars, and the jars can get out of date. So they are, let's say they're using Java or Scala with Spark, and so then they have jars, or they're using Python, and there's dependencies. All the jars have to be sent onto the cluster. They're writing this code, putting it into production, and so you have, they're writing code in Git. And now if you look at that, now it's like, let's say I have to look at the performance, right? Okay, this is not fast enough, so now I can go into the Spark UI and look at the physics, and what you see is the physical plan, which is a directed graph built out of the code. Now, I can't correlate sections back to my code. It's a really deep dive. So the paradigm that I have for development is different from the paradigm I have for debugging, is different from the paradigm I have for performance. And every time I have to go into this. So now, okay, the Spark thing, okay, now let me go into the Airflow UI, right? And then you ask them, okay, what does your average data quality look like for this project? They have no clue. How many pipelines got put into production? They have no clue. Some column went bad. Who's the last person? You'll go, somebody will say, hey, this team, you wrote this data set last, and they look through their code, fumble through it, and say, oh, this is a pass-through column. Look, we didn't touch it, right? And then somebody who's a metadata architect is like, I'm tracking personally identifying information, PII, right? And now they have to go through every source data set, then look through the scripts and see who used this column and modified it and wrote it into another. So the whole management is a mess.
That's interesting. That's actually the best explanation. Let me see if I know what you're saying. So in the olden days, right, we had a kind of straight through processing. You could see the line of what you were building, right? You're pulling down different types of data, you're joining it, you're pressing it, sending it out, publishing that to your users, and it had like a view. What you're saying in the new world, there's kind of nowhere to orient yourself. It's just a big glut of scripts and activities, and there's really no way to orient yourself to deep.
Yeah, and to add to that, it's a big like what I call googly goo. So the thing is, you are modifying data. Let's say I'm writing my Spark script or my big SQL script, and I've seen really, SQL is very simple when it's small. The scripts I've seen in Hive, like 500, 600 line scripts, unioning all these like, very complicated operations, I would say, correlated, non-correlated subqueries, all of that, they get really complex to read. So the basic thing is, let's say I have a script, I'm on line 541, there is data frame 17. And there's a line modifying it. I don't know what the data frame looks like. So the main thing is, all your code is doing is transforming the data. When you are writing code, you cannot see the data you're transforming. How silly is that to have as your program, development paradigm where you can't see the data? So now people write 2, 3 lines, 4 lines, see the data again, data frame.show, or SQL, they run the select part of the query, run it, and then again do it, and again do it. And then that's when they're developing. So it's a few lines, few more lines, few more lines, few more lines. And then that data engineer leaves, that ETL developer leaves. And somebody else comes in, and you go into a large enterprise, and there's like 30,000 pipelines, and the people who are there have not written it. Now they have to understand it. And this huge script is there, and they don't know what any of that means. So now you have to create that visual model, run it by pieces to be able to understand and modify it. And it's really a horrendous paradigm for doing data engineering or building pipelines. So visual pipelines is just fundamentally better.
That's the best explanation too, because I always think of low code or visual pipelines as non-technical, but you're really right to say it's a different skill set, because it's just a way to orient yourself, right? In this data, in this pipeline, if you're new, if you're starting over, that's actually really, really helpful. Let's go back to prophecy real quick and talk a little bit about, you have like 3 areas of focus, I think, right? You've got the low code environment, visual environment, you've got some focus on data quality, and then operational excellence. You want to just kind of hit on those so we kind of understand what the platform's focused on?
Sure. So for our low code development, we are looking at the entire data platform and saying you should be able to go end to end in low code environment. So what we've had for a long time is low code Spark. Most of our customers are on Databricks. We love Databricks. And a lot of customers are running like, they could be running 10,000 pipelines, right? 20,000 pipelines. And so these people are running all these pipelines, developing them visually, developing reusable subgraphs, reusable components. So there's two things that make Prophecy unique. One thing is every time you're developing a visual pipeline, we generate code for it. High quality, completely 100% open source, and that matches what your best data engineers would write. And many data engineers have looked at it and said, yeah, that's the code I would write.
And then the GEMS code is in GitHub, right?
The generated code is in GitHub. It has tests with it. And, so you have unit tests, you have generated code, goes to GitHub, is high quality code. And if you read it, you'd be like, oh, this is very simple to read and understand.
Let me just pause you there because that's not typically the case in low code generators. It's not typically the case that the code is reliable, right? It's actually kind of often pretty squirrely.
Yes, it's pretty squirrely, and some other people say, oh, we generate code too, but then I say, have you looked at the code? The code we generate, you can look, you can understand. It's like a handwritten person would have written it. So we have it very, very well structured. We even make it look nice, right? We really care.
I double click on that. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I double click on that because as a technical product manager, I think that's a super important question. There's so many tools that say they do this. But then if you're also trying to unlock all of your operations and implementation, you've got like long-term concerns about, versioning code. It's well worth the question to look under the hood at the quality of the code that's being generated out of these tools.
Definitely. So then going back up a level, so now you can do this low-code visual development on Spark, and you're getting code in Scala or Python, whatever you choose. And now what we released just 2-3 weeks back now is low-code SQL. So what you can do there is now it's like if you're on a cloud data warehouse, and what you can do is you can do visual drag and drop, and side by side we are generating SQL code. So this is basically the people who on-prem use something like Alteryx. These are data analysts, business analysts, and they quickly build visual drag and drop on top of their data warehouse, get data together for their dashboard, and then they'll connect that, use that in Tableau. So those users, now they can themselves, without relying on the central data platform team, again, do visual drag and drop. And what we generate is, again, 100% open source SQL code. And we also chose the DBT format because we are looking at it and saying we want to use the most popular format for the code. And on Spark, it's very clear, like Scala has SBD as the build system. Now you go into the SQL world and they didn't have a build system. SQL didn't. So everybody was writing their custom scripts, and what DBT has done is like, here is a build system, right? It, like other programming languages, allows you to break up your SQL into different files, as Java would enable you to do, right? Every class has a different file, and then they can put configuration. So it's a standard way of organizing SQL files.
And is that to help with the performance? Sometimes SQL gets really bloated. Does that help with that, or why do we do that?
It's basically modularity, right? So what we do is that for every visual component corresponds to a function, and these refer to one another. And DBT gives you a way of splitting SQL files into smaller files, so they call them models. Each model might not be materialized as a table. So if I have customer as a model, orders as a model, if it's SQL statement, I say materialize as a table, then it's a table. If I have, sales, total sales by customer, and now I'm producing it from customers and orders, if it were not materialized, then those would just become subqueries. So in that sense, it enables you to break these things into, DBT enables you to say, I have a model, say customers, say orders, and products and so on, and create one SQL file per model. And for us also visually, it helps us break down. Now we can say each visual transform is a so in our case, each subgraph is a SQL file, and each visual component can become a CTE, a common table expression. So with customers as this, with customers as select this, with orders as select this, my total sales by customer is group by customer total of orders. So something like that. So basically we are able to split code and then build it with configuration for development, for prod. You would do it in any programming language, and they have a build system, and then DBT enables us to do that. break it up into smaller files, have configuration and stuff.
So as you kind of you just went through this journey, right, of operationalizing your SQL with these DBT, right, components, core. I had a question for you. It might be this like this new release, or it might be looking back to creating 100% parallelism between the code and the low code generator for, Spark isn't easy.
Yeah.
And so I don't want you to really reveal any state secrets, but as a technology lead, what were some trade-offs or some, points of view you had to take as you're thinking about how to make this the same for code as it is in this low code visual front
Yes.
end?
So this has been very interesting, especially for the SQL part, right, which is new. Is so one of the things you can do. I didn't explicitly mention it, but so you can go to any existing DBT core project, an open source project, and open it up in Prophecy. And it will open up as visual pipeline. So this visual to code is bidirectional. We are saying visual and code is the same paradigm. As long as, so now as a, let's say if you're using DBT, so what you can do is open any project, it becomes visual pipelines. You can edit it visually or you can edit it in code and the other side gets updated instantly.
So you
So
could collaborate, right? If you're working,
yeah,
this happens in industry quite a bit, right? Where you're on the phone or Zoom.
yeah. So let's say that you are in a DBT project and some of your users like to prefer SQL code, and they can write their SQL code or SQL code, and then they can ask their other teammates who prefer visual drag and drop to come and collaborate on the same pipeline. And the other people can view it visually, edit it. So it enables both of the users to be able to do the exact same thing. Then comes like, how do you represent? Now it becomes an interesting challenge to merge those two paradigms because everything has to match exactly. And also if you edit, so it's like there is a complete equivalence in both sides, in that like if you go back to visual and come back to code, it has to be, if you didn't modify it or if your modification is just one expression, it should be one expression modification. And that's, I think, something we've achieved. Of course, here my compiler and those parsing and code generation skills come into play, and we have brilliant team who's built this. But in that sense, right, we have the correct, so we have a multi-layer thing where in the top, as you log in, you can see lineage of models feeding into other models, something that you could even see in DBT at the end, right? In DBT, after you write the code, you can visualize the lineage
Of the code.
of like this model feeds into this model, right? At the top
So
level,
you
the
see how the
customer feeds
interaction.
into customer orders and this. When you come into Prophecy, you can see the top level view visually. The only thing that what's different is it's editable. So now you can double click on one of the models and that will open that SQL file as a subgraph, and that subgraph will have visual components, and that completely describes that, and it will have multiple coordinatable expressions and everything. You don't need to know that visually. Visually, it's just a single pipeline.
So let's say like I was just doing some analysis on like loan underwriting, mortgage loans, right? And all of a sudden I thought, oh, you know what? I need to understand what upstream data Raj is pulling for this particular credit scoring model. And I go in and I see that it's the wrong one. You're using some copy of something. Then I can edit it directly, right? And then replace it with the correct one.
With the correct one, yes. And then if you want to find the correct one, you can just browse your data warehouse, pick the correct table, just drag it onto the canvas and
Just
say
drag it
about
on.
you and connect it to the component and delete the old one visually.
And the kind of lineage you're offering is I could look back and say, how many decisions did I make with the old thing, right?
Yes. So in that sense, you have the top level, because these days people are talking about having more than 5,000 DBT models, right?
Okay.
And that, imagine that, right? That can get quite complicated. So, we are also enabling people to, or encouraging people to break it down into slightly smaller projects. And then you can see things across project, you can see things in a project. But what you're looking at it is overall, you're looking at, hey, these are all the models I computed. This is the next set. And you can see all of those visually. And and I think the thing that we are looking at is coming back to, again, going back a little, we kind of did a deep dive, right? And so we had the Spark piece, and now we've done a deep dive into the SQL piece. And and then continuing that thread, if I may, going back, we also have low code Airflow. So that's
Right.
something which we have released, and it will be very uh, 3.0 it's out there, 3.1 it will be more mature. Basically, and so that what that enables you to do is visually orchestrate Airflow pipelines. And
Yeah.
and the thing that makes our product unique is, like I said, you could create your own visual components. So you can create new Spark components, you can create new SQL components, you can create new Airflow operators, and you can add them to the visual canvas and have everybody else use it. So I think
Mm-hmm.
we kind of started from this overall question, and then we went into Spark, did a little bit of deep dive, and did a much deeper dive into SQL. And then this is the entire low code piece of the product. But
Mm-hmm.
apart from the low code piece, right, we have data ops. What that means is everything is Git tests. You have your code on Git, you have your test for the transformation. You develop in a Git branch every time you enable a schedule, and then once you release it, at that point, all the artifacts for that, orchestration or schedule, which is run this pipeline at 9 a.m., get deployed automatically. You don't have to worry about that. It can also work with people. Some people use it with their existing CI/CD system
Mm-hmm.
because, if you're connected to Git, you can do that. The other thing is they just use ours. So in that sense, you're using proper software development practices. You have tests, you have branches, and, you're following a proper release process, something that the world of visual tools has not had. And the code,
Right.
and that enables you to get more confidence, right? So some confidence will come that all my tests passed, right? And then the other set of confidence can be, you can also say, these are my assertions on the data set. So you can say, these are my expectations. And then there is anomaly detection. That's another area where we are starting
Man.
work. We're working with our first design customer, where right now you can do basic expectations, and we'll get more anomaly detection in the next release as well. So now we are saying, hey, we'll also monitor your data set. So now once you have your unit test for transformation, you're observing the quality of your data sets, you can push to production much quicker with a lot of confidence. So that is going to accelerate the speed at which people can put data pipelines into production. So that's the second big piece with tests for the data pipelines and for the
Uh-huh.
data itself. And then we have search, we have column level lineage, and we have basic monitoring, which will become better over time. That's another big area to go into.
I want to ask you some other questions about just general topics, but one thing that's kind of interesting is there's just and you may or may not have an opinion on this, but I hear a lot of people talking about transforms, tracking transforms, and I feel like people use a lot of different definitions for types of transforms, and you have column level lineage. Does that allow me to see? I mean, how do you define transforms, first of all, as data
The
moves through your
transform is
system?
you're taking one or more data sets and transforming the data between it, right? You could be doing something as simple as a join,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a transform. A filter is a transform. Anything that will transform the data, or you might be, joining two tables and creating a whole bunch of computed columns based on that. You might be enriching data with other things. Also, all of these, right? So you have source, and then you have targets, and in the
Okay.
middle, everything you do is transforms.
Okay, that was my question. It's like when you move it around, anytime
Yes,
it's like all the touches, the moving it, right? You can change
yes,
it. Okay. Yeah. I just feel like a lot of conversations need to include that full, everything from a fancy calculation all the way to just moving to target, right? Can
yes.
change the outcomes. And I just wondered if you're hearing more about that. People are asking you around. Is that something I know you do lineage today, but you're going to expand on transforms in the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, lineage is something that is allowing you to, in a sense, observe the transformations, right? But so what we are
That's right.
focused on is enabling people to do transformations, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing that has changed in the modern data stack, because what you had earlier was ETL, right? Extract, transform, load. And now you come in and there's a lot of tools like Fivetran and the 20 clones of theirs, and they have extract and load. So
Right.
that's like the connector piece. You have a connector here, and you're going to do point-to-point data motion. So if you do that, what you're left with is all the source system, a copy of them on the target system, but still it doesn't help you get all the right analytics. So after that, you have to do transforms. So 90% of the data work is actually transforms. And it's
I
something
love.
that when I talk to investors and when I've talked to some customers understand it a little more. It's not obvious that, hey, the work is all in transform, not in extract and load. That's like, okay, yes, you have to do the work, but you set it up and it's going to keep running. But where the users spend their time is in data transformation. And that's a very hard thing to crack.
Like a little bit of gray area, right? Depending on who's worried about it the most. So that's helpful.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. You talked a little bit about, these massive implementations on Databricks, right? There's lots and lots of data, tons of workspaces, right? What have you seen that's worked for, I think I know what you're going to say, but, how would I implement this? If I was, the head of data platform, I'm like, great, let's do it.
Yeah.
What types of teams? Is it the data science team that embraces this? Is it the business analyst team? Like, how do you get going?
So we are seeing two primary patterns, right? So so sometimes it's a line of business team. So we have like a Fortune 50 medical devices pharma company. They come in and they want to do some supply chain analytics, right? So now they're like, okay, they have their ERP systems. They're going to go into, Databricks, and then they're going to transform the data. That's a line of business team who wants to do analytics. They have access to the source data. Not many of them write code. They're building visual pipelines. Now, then you have the central data platform team. So the central data platform team, some of the people are like, I can write Spark code. And most of the people, and depends on, depends from company to company. A lot of enterprises who have had visual drag and drop on-prem products, they have hundreds of engineers who prefer that, the visual
Mm-hmm.
paradigm. So that's one. But so what? Either the data platform team themselves uses it, or they provide us as a service to the line of business team. So I
Okay.
think the second thing is very interesting, because what it's saying is that, okay, the central data platform team is saying, I bought Databricks, I set it up, and now we can build pipelines on it, but nobody else can consume what we have, because they're not experts in Spark, and I guess now they're starting to use SQL, so that helps. But some of them, not many of them write complex SQL also, because the data
Correct.
pipelines in SQL, since they have so many steps, they get quite complex. So what what they do is they say, okay, now as part of my platform team, I'm going to put Prophecy on top and provide it to all the line of business teams. Now, if line of business team, now that makes a lot of the data and their data platform accessible to a lot more teams. Those teams can start building a lot of the pipelines themselves. And unlike the last generation, right? Let's say you had Alteryx on-prem. You could do visual drag and drop, but that would only run in Alteryx. That's a desktop tool. Maybe you could run it on Alteryx server, but it's not native to the platform. Whereas here, if the line of business person is doing visual drag and drop, they are building same quality of data pipelines because a lot of them have been rewriting these pipelines, right? The data
Oh
analyst builds
yeah.
something in Alteryx, then it gives to a central data platform team, then they rewrite it to run at scale and on their data platform, and now that's gone, right? They all have access to the same platform. And the second thing is, like, now the data platform team is able to build standards. So they can write Spark code and say, this is how you access our internal systems, right? And some of the things get more complicated, right? This is our security
They can
library.
kind of enforce standards, right?
Yes. So what they're
Okay.
doing is they are creating new visual components that go into the menu, which do standard things, so that but all line of business teams are doing the same thing. So think of a security library. This is our encryption, this is decryption, this is anonymization, and I put the visual components in your canvas from a line of business, for every line of business, and now everybody has the same operation, they can do it.
That's
They
it.
could also have something that does, you know, sending a message, or an alerting task if something fails. Now they can create these operational standard components and have everybody use them. So what they're doing is creating these reusable pieces, either for connecting to their internal systems or their operational things that they want to streamline and standardize, and also for the business logic, which is reused across many teams.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because what you can do is create visual components, create subgraphs of visual components, and one project can publish it, another project can subscribe to it. So now you can start reusing a lot of that instead of, building each
Oh
thing
yeah,
again
you
and
can
again,
reuse it,
because
and
there's a lot of
you can
repetition.
update it. You can start updating it without too much. Right. If you were to
Yeah.
update that, you wouldn't. Would you break the downstream, or it would just flow
No,
in?
so there is versioning, right? So there is
Okay.
versioning. So basically, but your project will depend on another project as of a particular version. If the project you depend on releases a new version, you can choose to try the new version, test it, and if it is right, you can commit to it and say, okay, I move to the new version, or you can stay on the older version. So
That's
there is a lot of
sophisticated. That's very
that.
sophisticated. That's very sophisticated, right? That's a
Yes,
great.
it's
Hmm.
yeah, and a lot of these things are not clearly visible, right? You're using a visual tool, or that looks like a visual tool. This looks like a visual tool. It's like we've we've thought through a lot and built a lot, and it's sometimes not easy to see in the first glance.
Yes, that's right. This is the thing about really great technology. When you don't see it, it's working.
And
Yeah,
so
go
just to wrap up the question, sorry if may.
ahead.
So in that sense, right? So what we are doing is enabling the data platform teams to build a platform and make it available to a lot more people. Some people on their team, where you're making people more productive, and enabling the line of business teams to self-serve and be able to transform data themselves, and then only come to the central data platform team for some heavy lifting. So in that sense, it's democratization. It's increasing productivity of all users in the data platform and the line of business.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for talking through that and giving us some ways of thinking about the technical decisions and underpinnings that you put into the product. All right, I'm going to ask a question now. You can't say you don't have any, but um, what about competitors? And it may not be a competitor across all that you do, but
Yeah,
in portions of what you do, what do you hear from customers or typically?
sure. So in terms of competitors, right? So, or let me give you a little bit of a, a market map in a sense, right? So in buckets. So one bucket you have is the bucket of on-premises ETL products. So if you go to Gartner Magic Quadrant, and I work with Gartner, really, really sharp guys, what they have is the on-premises market right now, because that's where the large footprint is. And mostly when customers come to us, and when we hear of an ab initio, an IBM data stage, SaaS DI, Microsoft SSIS, Alteryx, they're looking at it and saying, this is what I'm on, and I have 10, 20,000, a large bank would have 80,000 or so pipelines, and I want to move to the cloud, and how do I get there?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one, they want a replacement product, and it's the same, right? If you were on Teradata, you'd want a Snowflake. If you
Mm-hmm.
are on Ab initio or Data Stage or something, you'd be like, okay, I choose Prophecy, let's say. Then the second piece is, can you move me? So
Mm-hmm.
what we've done is we've written automated compilers or transpilers to be able to import the pipeline. So these are very sophisticated ones. We have one for Ab initio, we have one for Informatica, for Data Stage, one even for SnapLogic. One customer asked for it. So what we have an expertise where we can quickly build these cross compilers and pull in. But our interaction with the on-prem products is that now once you move to the cloud, right, now either you're going to write code, and a lot of teams are like, okay, I started using Databricks, or I started using SQL, maybe Snowflake, and initially we wrote some scripts, and after a while they're like, okay, this is not scaling,
Mm-hmm.
right? So either you can write code, so you can write Spark code or SQL code, or you can use a low code product. Now in low code product, one product of the last generation, Informatica, has built a cloud. The rest of them are not even attempting, right? So
That's right.
so the rest of them, all of them have to be replaced as you move to the cloud. And then there is Matillion, which is also a simpler product. They don't generate code, and they are not extensible, but they can give you simple transforms on a data warehouse, SQL data warehouse. And so we've seen Matillion a few times in the market. But those are the only choices, right? So either you say I
Okay.
use Matillion, or you say I'm going to use Informatica, or you're going to write code.
You're just
Now,
gonna code it yourself.
or you're going to code it. So for us, 90% of the time it's us or code. Like
Okay.
literally, it's not like where we are being POC'd against another product. The
Okay.
other product, the cloud vendors have some product, but they are also not very good.
And
Like
then,
I wouldn't want to name them since they're our partners,
no, you don't
but
have to.
every cloud vendor has their native ETL product, and nobody uses them.
Well, this is the platform play, right? I mean, the minute you bring up any functionality, all the platform guys are like, "Oh, we also do that. We have a beta product, and
Yes, but
TBD whether it does that what it's supposed
but
to."
if they're building something that requires an API, they're able to do it. But if the
Mhm.
cloud vendors try to build products which have UX and visual drag and drop, and a lot of things that require a lot of design and working closely with
Uh,
customers, that's hard. If you have to build a database, the interface is simple. They're able to build it.
that's interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna think more about that. Actually, that's a good way to distinguish who's a threat and who isn't. Um,
Yeah.
so let me ask you this: we can't do any talking about technology without asking a little bit about LLMs. And
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you and your team have been giving that some thought, or I know you work with GitHub quite a bit. So
Yeah.
can you share with us
So
directionally what your thoughts are?
yeah, so we are working on LLMs, and for us, it's very interesting. In a sense, we are in this unique space, which is, and I'll tell you how the structure of the space is different. So when you're looking at LLMs, right, what are the things I want, right? So structurally, the first thing that's interesting is if let's say I'm using GitHub Copilot, I am writing Python code, and I write an English sentence, and GitHub Copilot gives me rest of the Python code. That's great. Either it has to be 100% right, or I have to understand it and modify it.
Mhm.
So it is a productivity increase, but it is not democratizing at all, because I still have to know the Python, right? So it does not enable more users. It makes the existing users more productive. So that is what a GitHub Copilot can do. The basic thing is, even if you're writing in English, you're going to code, you have to know the code. Now, what's different here structurally, what you want in the structure for us is, if you have a data user who writes English, and let's say there's a bunch of startups that say, hey, we can convert English to SQL. That's great. But the thing is, what we have is SQL and visual pipelines are the same thing. So
Right.
you write English and we can immediately give you visual pipelines where you can see the data after every step, open up the visual components. So you don't have to look through the complex SQL. You'll always get a correct data pipeline. So that's what we are building, that you write some English, you'll get a data pipeline. It'll always work. Maybe it does 80% of what you want to do. And you can look at the visual pipeline and say, oh, kind of does what I want. Let me make a few changes. But then guess what happens? You make those changes and we get data
Is that
of what the right pipeline to produce was. Because
okay?
now the user can go and modify it. So one is, in our case, it's a productivity boost, and it is democratization. It's enabling a lot more users to use the product. So, there is like, if you so the use cases that we are focused on is, and this will come in our next release later in the summer. Um, if you put the first table, you drag and drop customers, it's going to come and say, I think you're going to do a join with the orders next. Right?
Uh-huh.
Or if you start to write an expression and you've written that expression somewhere else, or we can look at it and say, oh, you wanted to reformat the date. This looks like the most likely thing you'll do. Do you want me to just add it? So what are the users doing anyway, right? They're going to, they're searching online for what code to write for parsing date and then copy pasting it, right? We can just do it with machine learning. So there are a lot of things. And then, nobody likes to write Git comments. Nobody writes a description on their pipeline. All of that can be done with LLM. So it's a very, very interesting area for us, because so much can be automated away. So we think over time, we are progressing in that direction, but we'll have some exciting stuff to share in a few months.
Excellent. I think you're probably looking at some of these open source LLMs.
Yes, that's a tricky one, right? Because for us to be able to use it, it has to be Apache 2 or
Oh,
BSD licensed.
okay.
For example, what Facebook has released Llama models, they cannot be used commercially, right? We are working with large banks, large healthcare providers. So some of them are on-prem, a few of them. A lot of them have strict security requirements, so they might get our software inside their VPC, and it's just not feasible for us to make a call to OpenAI, right? That just
Um,
doesn't fly. So we have to pick a
that,
different model.
I got you. That's helpful. Anything else directionally that we should be looking for in your next releases?
Um,
Collab?
yeah, I think the other thing that we are going to come up with at the end of summer is what we'll call Gem Hub. So basically, what you have is that you're able to create visual components, right? But now what you can do is you'll be able to create and go to a library and publish, right? So you'll have a gem hub, you go there, you can see all the different visual components and subgraphs which are published by various teams in the organization. And some that might be available generally publicly. If one customer asks for it, we'll create it, not put it in the main palette, but then we'll create this extra security library, this extra healthcare library, this extra, so these visual components can all be, companies can create their own and share it with all the teams, and whoever wants to use it can go to this hub, pick the transforms they want to use and start using them, or they could even browse the public ones that we are creating or somebody else in the community is creating and start using that. So once you have that kind of a hub experience, which is more like a store but free, right? So you can
I
go
think
there
that's
and
great.
pick visual components you want. So I think that could become quite exciting.
I'm just from the old open source world. I just want everybody to share everything. So I think, especially even inside a company, a lot of really smart people figure out answers. And if only
and
they were shared, it would be so much better, right?
And like Airflow has gotten success because of that, right? They have operators and one person builds it and many people use it. And, we can do that for the entire data engineering or data transformation space.
Let me ask you this. Sorry. Let's talk a little bit about the business and being a technical founder, just in the last few
Sure.
minutes we have here. So you and your co-founder have both deep technical backgrounds, right?
Yes.
How did you guys connect on and decide to build a company
So
together?
in my company, it's a little, in here, in Prophecy, it's unique. I started with the company alone.
Okay.
So then, and then till I got seed funding, it was just me and a couple of developers who are actually based out of India because I didn't have much money.
Okay.
And then there is Berkeley Skydeck has this accelerator where I met one of the co-founders who joined right after I got the seed round. And then another co-founder, so that is Machek. And then Vikas is the second co-founder, and he also joined after the seed round, but he's from sales background. So he is like the business side. And so, yeah, so in that sense, they joined a little bit later, but I think but Vikas angel funded the company and helped me raise money early on. He stayed involved with us part-time till we got far enough to be able to sell the product to the second customer, because we had one large customer as the design customer. After that, that's when he joined, because that's when it made sense. Otherwise, that we'd just be burning money without a ready product.
So you connected through your accelerator experience, right?
One,
That's
I
how you.
connected through Accelerator. The second person I knew from school.
Okay.
He was in the same computer science undergrad program back in late 90s. Dating
Nice.
myself here, but yeah.
So those of you who are taking your computer science classes now, just be really nice to all of your students. You never know. You might end up working with them years later.
Yeah.
So here's my question: I was just curious about that, because a lot of technical founders, one, they think they have to wait till they have a great idea, or they think they have to wait until they have a co-founder. So in your case, you had a great idea and you did not wait to have a co-founder. You just got started.
No. Hey, I mean, it's really funny. I mean, I'm not like nobody would join me. I'm not saying like
I wasn't against it. I'm just saying nobody was here.
People have all these beliefs that everything is like, oh, I did this and then that's how you market stuff. That's not how stuff really works. Right? It's like, I'm like, okay, I need a co-founder, and somebody's like, oh, I have young kids, and somebody like, not the right time for me. And you don't have 50 people who could be co-founders. You just have a few, right? That you think could be good co-founders. And if they're all busy with something else, if they're really smart, they're probably busy with something else. So it's not easy to find them. And then, this worked well for me. And then the other thing, same about funding, right? It's like you go to the investors and it's really hard to get investments. And, so
Yeah.
So,
Are you talking to any investors now? I mean, the environment has
oh, yeah,
changed.
we'll start raising our Series B in a couple of weeks, actually.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
All right.
yeah, so we're doing pretty good. We've done more than 5x year on year on revenue. So we're doing pretty good. We have a lot of Fortune 500 and I would say a lot of Fortune 50 customers now.
Mhm.
So in that sense, we have so the company is doing well. We are raising a Series B. It yeah, so it looks like it's even in the current market, people are investing.
But well, you have a good idea. I always tell people, good
Yeah,
ideas get funded, right?
and,
Go ahead.
mhm. And then for us, right? For me actually. This is what has happened is okay. So the valuation will come down. That sucks, right? But on the other hand, you know, everybody was like, we are selling enterprise revenue, solving a real problem, replacing a multi-billion-dollar spend on prem, and nobody was interested. People like, are you bottoms up? Oh, are you going to mid-market first, right? Are you PLG? I'm like, no, we are replacing a big category. But then it wasn't easy for Snowflake to, very famously, Snowflake could not get their Series B, right? Nobody in Bay Area would fund because the investors are looking for this tiny thing that quickly gets traction and they fund it, right? And that's what was really selling in 2020, 2021. Nobody was asking anything about durability, about moats, right? You have 5 grand, then you have 10 5 grand competitors. I'm like, how do they
Yeah.
get
Well,
5 grand can be commoditized by Airbyte,
mhm.
right? Then obviously Airbyte will not have a moat, right?
You may have already asked me. I mean, you may have already answered this question, but what advice would you give to other technical founders? I remember when I first met you were at a networking event. You were at hanging out, and I was like, "Who do you want to meet?" I'm like, "I don't really love talking to people all day, right?" Like I did all my talking, and I feel like that is for like technical founders. You're working in code. You've got like a certain discipline and point of view. What advice would you give for other technical founders who might be struggling with balancing?
So, I mean, the balancing is a tricky one. So I think the general advice, the first advice is about what should one build, right? So if you are like me, you've gone through, at least a couple of decades of work. I would say I won't take market risk at all, right? At that stage, if your strength is execution and your strength is building the product and the business, you should be going for an existing replacement, right?
That,
You have a paradigm shift. People are moving from desktop to mobile or moving from enterprise to cloud. That's a great transition to have. The second thing I would say is uh, to be very grounded in fundamentals, right? Like when we built Apache Hive, right? Let's say I was looking at the product and, they said MapReduce. I'm like, this is nuts, right? What are they doing? And then, thank God, like I would have no credibility to be able to say that and have people believe it because Hadoop was so cool. And then, Stonebreaker says, what the hell is this? And then, now he's a database guru, but people still are like, no, 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 this is great. And, I got like hype with MapReduce and we replaced it. The first thing built a DAG-based engine, which is Base, and it got 100x faster. 100x faster? How bad was MapReduce? And, Google talking about it and every intern is coming. So the other thing is there is a lot of noise in the market. Now let's say I am selling Hive, I don't know, for what, 250 or 2000, doesn't matter. Say 2000 or $250 a core. But what you're offloading is Teradata at $250,000 a core, right? Or that's what used to be. So the basic point is, why is that software commanding that much price, right? And then you look at it and say, like, people went back and rediscovered data warehouse like Snowflake, built by Oracle people, right? So basically, that's the other thing is like, the fundamental thing is like that Hadoop detour was just like a wrong direction, and that will go on for a decade. So that's the other thing, right? It's about depend. If you're building a durable B2B business, I would say go to enterprise. And the reason for that is your users are sophisticated. Even though you
Mhm.
might say, oh, they're not, they're sophisticated in the sense they have large scale problems and they have seen 2 generations of product, right?
Right.
So what happens? Let's say you have the modern data stack company, right? They are like fishing in a small pond, right?
Right.
Not in the
That's
ocean. So
right.
what happens is you are like, I'm a startup founder. I have never seen the technologies. Like God, read it, right? And then, so you're like, I haven't seen the last generation of products, right? So that's what's going on right now. So they build a product and then they go sell to another person in the startup who's also, so this person, let's say, is 5 years out of school. They build a product for another person. The user is 5 years out of school in a startup. They have never seen the last generation of enterprise product. They go to an investor who's 5 year
Uh-huh.
out from school doing, from a consulting program or from an MBA, become an analyst and senior analyst and this, they have never seen it. So now they're funding all of those, right? So it's like, here, metadata is going to be a space and data observability is going to be a space and all of this. And I'm like, no, these are features. And the thing is, the thing I would advise is like, you can go look at it as if 1,000 people believe it, including smart investors, smart founders, and smart users, they are often all wrong.
They
And
could still be wrong. I love what you're saying.
and
Yes, yes. I mean, that's it. Don't be too overawed, right? It
don't
sometimes
be
that
overawed.
you come in and it's like, oh well, this question's already been answered, and the answer works. I think it's so important, and I like what you're saying. It's just to question that and not let yourself be set back on your heels. You could be the person with the next big answer. I think that's
Yeah.
just, yeah.
And the thing is that, and in that way, kudos to the Snowflake team, right? In that,
Mm-hmm.
because who would have said that I'm going to come in and build a new cloud data warehouse with Redshift and everything there? And they're like, no, there isn't a good one, and you're going to build the whole thing. And
Yeah, I
so,
like that. So big ideas and big
right.
like shifts, right? Where you can really take over a quadrant or an old process that's moving. I really like that perspective.
Yeah, and in that sense, it's easier to scale as well, right? Because now when I'm talking about B2B, right? And it's like now, if I have to scale and we hire an army of salespeople, let's say,
Okay.
right? There are budgets allocated in companies. You're
Right.
going to go there and they're going to say, what are you buying this for? I don't have to go create a market. God, I don't want to hit my head against I mean, I am, it's amazing the people who can, build a new market and, go and convince everybody this is the new way to do it. As a first time entrepreneur, life is hard enough. I can't create a
Okay.
category. I will go replace a category. Budgets are allocated. People are doing a platform shift. I can go build the right technical solution, build the right company machinery, and that is hard enough. And
And you speak the
creating a whole
language. You're
machinery is
speaking the
quite hard.
language that the customer understands, right? They
Yeah, the
understand. Yes,
customer
that is my
understands, and
customer.
the other thing is, go start working. Like you'll have your idea will be half baked. Go find a design customers. The customers have been solving this problem for 20 years. They'll teach you.
I know we're at the end and we have to leave, but I actually think that's such an important concept to have that vulnerability. It's so uncomfortable to build
Yeah.
something that might have flaws or that you have to kind of show people before it's ready. And, I'm not saying it's easy, but I do see a lot of entrepreneurs like you who are willing to kind of have some rough edges in the product and work with a partner. And, I think any VC will be like, oh, just work with a design partner. But actually doing it day to day can be super challenging.
It's going to be super
So
challenging, and you've got to listen. You've got to listen a lot because your users know what they want often, especially if your
that was
space is not brand new and they've been there for a while.
hmm So I'm just so glad to get a chance to catch up with you. It sounds like things are going great at Prophecy,
Yes.
and look forward to the next releases of Gem Hub and your LLM.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. It was a pleasure, Jocelyn. Take care.
Thanks.